All right, music's now down. I guess we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Mike Amerlon. I work at Microsoft as the Director of Ecosystem Marketing. So what that means is I work with developers, I work with partners who build on top of Office and Microsoft 365 more broadly. And I'm joined here today by Wei, who's a program manager on the developer teams for Outlook and also helps and builds all the products that you're going to be seeing later today. So between the two of us, we're going to give you essentially the grand developers tour of Microsoft 365. We're going to cover 5 specific vignettes of solutions that you can go build to drive engagement for your application. Now, I know all of you end up building apps, you've been building websites, and that really is the core of the experience that you're looking to deliver. But I hope what you take away from today is some simple and easy things that you can do to make it more engaging, to transform how people work in your companies, to make them more productive and get things done more quickly. So you might have noticed that I mentioned Microsoft 365. We come from the Office 365 team. We tend to focus on things like SharePoint and Teams and Outlook and Word and Excel and PowerPoint. But more broadly, Microsoft 365 is this union of a number of different products, things like Windows 10, things like Office 365, and our enterprise mobility and security products put together. We think that when you actually combine these things, they're actually help you do more. So for example, they unlock your creativity through tools that you see inside of Office. They're built for teamwork, so with applications like Microsoft Teams, it literally has Teams in the name. It is the tool that brings teams together in a chat-based experience. And then, of course, it's easy to manage in terms of being integrated for simplicity, making it easy as possible to manage, especially because it's cloud-based, with intelligent security features layered on that make it easier to make sure that every user is compliant and secure and has the right things that they need. Now, one key word here is the word complete. You can get Microsoft 365 and you have this end-to-end experience of all the software that you need to really make for a productive enterprise. But you can do even more with solutions that you build on top of Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 is, in a sense, a platform for building applications and really customizing experiences. Basically across every product that we have inside of Microsoft 365, it's designed with some sense of extensibility because we know, for example, if you work in healthcare, yes, we can do more in healthcare from Microsoft, but you as a healthcare company, as somebody who's concerned in that industry, you want to go further and do your own things, and you want to be able to customize Microsoft 365 to really tailor it and have it fit you like a glove. So when you think about the kinds of things that you can build on top of Microsoft 365, first, it starts with building applications on top of Windows 10. Inside of Windows 10, you'll find a lot of great developer technologies, things like WinML, which allow you to take advantage of local compute horsepower to go generate AI insights from your data. You can take advantage of things like Internet of Things technologies, so you can get that out. Of course, there's MR development. And inside of Windows itself, you can also just build really great, fluent user experiences that really work well for users. We really believe that as people come together and work on teams, it's important to give them a customized experience. Now, one of the things that really resonates with me is that everybody is working on twice the number of teams that they were 5 years ago. Because, of course, we have a more diverse workforce in terms of geographic distribution and time and those kinds of things. We're all more in more teams. And so making the most of that time that you spend in your teams is super critical. And so that's something where making that experience great for working on a team is really important. Also, tailoring software to the way that you work is also important. With all these new incoming messages and things that you have to deal with, that you have to focus on, the software should be able to be relied upon to sort of focus on what's important to you. So building these people and team-centric experiences that focus on giving people the right tools at the right time, that's definitely something that we want to make sure that we support fairly well. It's something where we also want to make sure it's integrated with all the communication and creativity tools that people use. People spend hours and hours of a day, I know I do, inside of Outlook, sending new emails, managing my calendar, those kinds of things. People spend a lot of time crafting their perfect document inside of Word. And so bringing your tools into those different applications can really help make for a more integrated, a more focused, and a more productive experience. The final thing I'll just say is if you build applications on Microsoft 365, you get a lot of the management and compliance benefits of Office, of Microsoft 365, quote unquote, for free. In other words, if you, for example, store your documents inside of SharePoint, then all of the tools that Office 365 has that relate to documents, things like document lifecycle and enforcing policies, those apply to the documents. And so rather than maybe rolling your own security system and your own compliance system in your own application, if you store documents in Office 365 and you connect to them, then you get those benefits of compliance for free. So to summarize the way this looks is, at the bottom, you're going to commonly have your own experience, which will be that great website, that great application. That's going to be the thing that you spend, that's the center of gravity for your application. You're going to craft the heck out of that. You're going to use all the development tools that you want to go use for that. Then you're going to want to go ship some mobile applications maybe that connect to it. But we do think that there's an opportunity in Office, for example, to actually extend those experiences as well, those red rectangles up above, to actually go customize the experiences wherever a user may be, whether it's Outlook or SharePoint or the Windows timeline, for example. Now, a key facilitating technology across all of this is something called Microsoft Graph. Now, you've probably heard of Microsoft Graph. It's this concept that folks talk about in keynotes, and you're going to hear it in a lot of different developer sessions, especially if you follow it. Quite simply, you can think of Microsoft Graph as Microsoft API. It is the one API that allows you in a consistent fashion to get data across a number of Microsoft 365 applications. So things like being able to work with activities in Windows, work with data from Excel, be able to access email from Outlook. All of these are exposed through one consistent Microsoft API. We call it Microsoft Graph. And the reason we call it Microsoft Graph is because all the data ends up being interconnected. So I can find a person, I can find their favorite groups, I can find the emails for those favorite groups, and then I can go take that list of incoming senders and do something with it. All the data is connected across each other. They're not siloed by particular products. And so for that reason, of course, we do have a number of APIs that are not Graph, but increasingly, all of the applications that you see inside of Microsoft 365, they save their data through Microsoft Graph, they load their data through Microsoft Graph, and they expose a lot of their services and capabilities through Microsoft Graph, and that includes Windows. One of the things we're actually announcing today or this week at Ignite is that Dynamics is offering its first Microsoft Graph APIs. So for Dynamics Financials, you'll actually be able to see those in Microsoft Graph as well. So, not today, but certainly one day soon, you might imagine essentially everything that Microsoft offers being exposed through Microsoft Graph. But even beyond that, we also hope that you will take the opportunity to extend Microsoft Graph as well. So there's different ways that you can actually extend different objects inside of Microsoft Graph. So for example, there's a user object in Microsoft Graph, which is essentially every employee inside of your organization. And with that user, what you can do is you can add custom properties. So for example, if you have a training system, and in that training system you want to track somebody's level that they've attained, you can store that on the user object, and then anywhere where your application accesses that user, you can get those associated properties. And we hope that in the future there will be more opportunities to actually integrate different data sets, different data models into Microsoft Graph in addition, so that you'll always want to have databases and those kinds of complicated stores, but for information to tie everything together, the idea is that you would hope that you'd use Microsoft Graph for that. Now, before we get into the developer part of this session, I just wanted to sort of take a brief minute to kind of, just scan the spectrum of different ways that you can actually extend Microsoft 365 as a platform. Now, first and foremost, we work with a number of different partners like Adobe, partners like Reich, who build applications and integrations directly into Microsoft 365, whether it's a tab in Teams or a new application in SharePoint or something inside of Word. For example, Adobe Sign, they do all three things. There's a great number of packaged applications that we have exposed. And so typically, if you go to appsource.microsoft.com, you can find a great set of applications to go work with. We are also supporting this category of end-user applications. So the idea being that a team leader or somebody on a team, or even if I'm just trying to set up custom notifications, I can go to an app like Microsoft Flow and actually build some steps, stitch them together, connect across various different applications, and then actually do something of value, whether it's like a notification or some sort of approval process. End users can build their own applications using Flow, using Microsoft Power Apps, and put them together and expose them as well. Now, as a team, we're also working to build more reference solutions. We really think that that's kind of what hopefully our secret advantage is, if you will. Not so secret now, is the idea that we can actually get these reference solutions that are open source projects that you can go get and go download as people in companies and people at software companies. Go download the open source and basically offer them as your own applications inside of your own company. So one of the options that you'll see a little bit later today is something called SharePoint Starter Kit. SharePoint Starter Kit is essentially a customized communication site in a box. It's all open source. Various people are contributing it, and then real enterprises are using it in their day-to-day production sites and building applications from it. So we think that with the open source community, there's a real opportunity to make it very easy for people to get just the customizations they need. And then finally, you can also go build solutions yourself, which is what we're going to talk about essentially for the rest of this presentation. So as I mentioned, like I said, we do have a number of great applications. This is just a very small subset that are packaged applications that are available from appsource.microsoft.com. Some, like Adobe Sign, really integrate into all of those tools. Some applications like Bentley. Bentley makes engineering software so that if you're doing a construction project or a major civil engineering project, you can manage it through Bentley. And they have a number of integrations where, for example, they'll integrate with communication in Microsoft Teams, or they'll work with files inside of SharePoint so that people who have Office 365 and Bentley can actually use the same systems in a very integrated way. So it's a really great solution. All right, so now let's get back to the 5 different ways and the 5 different tools that you can go extend as a developer on top of Microsoft 365. So I'm gonna cover one small vignette, and then I'm gonna cover a little bit of a landscape of a technology, and then finally I'm gonna give you a little bit of a roadmap of what's new, what's you can see at Microsoft Ignite, and then also further sessions later on in the week that you can go attend. So first, let's talk about how you can change conversations using bots and compose extensions. So with Microsoft Teams, it was designed with this idea of extensibility from day one, that you can basically change how Microsoft Teams works and how people communicate fundamentally. And one key tool for that is this idea of bots. So to take advantage of that, SAP, which is as big as it gets, as important as it gets as an ISV, are building an integration that they call Copilot. Now, Copilot is an automated assistant that actually provides key information and key actions that you would want to take across a wide range of SAP products. They're offering that as a bot inside of Microsoft Teams. Now, why a bot? Well, there's a lot of times where you're on the go, you're working, you're in different sort of modalities, and having a bot that you can talk with, that you can chat with in a natural language interface is really a way to make people at their most productive. So let me just show you a very quick example of this. So one of the key tools that SAP has is something called SuccessFactors, which contains a lot of different HR operations. So in this case, so with SuccessFactors, one of the common tasks is to record your time for a timesheet type of application. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is you can see the set of actions that we have available here. I'm going to say, go record my time. Now from there, what I'm going to say is, go record the time. And what it'll ask me is, OK, what kind of time recording do you want to actually go do for this? So there's what SAP Copilot will return is a custom card. But first I'm going to add what kind of day it is, and then it's going to return that custom card with a different type of day that you have inside of it. Now you can choose different types of time types, whether it's overtime or regular time. I'm going to use that card to go click submit. SAP is going to come back to me and ask me just one more thing, how many hours was I actually working? And then what will happen is SAP will record that time in the back-end system. This is the enterprise time management system. It'll give me a confirmation. I'll say yes, and then done. The time is recorded. So this is a very natural language interface. You can imagine if you're on the go, if you're doing different things, it can be a very handy way to make it easy for everybody inside of your company to go record time. They don't have to go sign in to different types of websites. They don't have to find the right page. They can just ask a question and then go get something done. Now, why is this important? It's because this is a growing consumer behavior that we see everywhere. Whether it's through things like Amazon Alexa or through Google or through Cortana or Siri, increasingly there's this ubiquitous sense of these things that are listening to what we're saying and that are able to interact with us at all times. I don't know about you, but I have an Alexa at home, and one of the most common actions that I do with my Alexa is I ask it, what time is it? Alexa, what time is it? And it'll just return the simple time. And the reason that is I've got a dozen devices that can tell me the time in my house, but sometimes when I'm really busy or I'm late for something, just being able to ask ambiently, Alexa, what time is it, is a really useful thing. And I apologize to anyone who's watching this recording that I just tripped your Alexa, sorry. But the idea with that is that, same thing in the enterprise. You're doing different things, you're maybe at a construction site, and you just want to simply record the time that you've spent this week. And so having that natural language conversation so that you don't have to whip out a laptop and log in and sign in, those kinds of things, can be really just the way that, just the thing that makes people more productive. So with SAP, they've built an infrastructure for turning conversations into actions, and they call this SAP Copilot. Now, at the center of this is a number of different AI and natural language technologies that SAP has that they've built and they've built on top of. So understanding simple things like, what do you mean when you say today or tomorrow, to more complex semantics around natural language. The other great thing is because SAP is so ubiquitous and they have so many different systems that really run the enterprise, they're in a great position to build a very rich, contextual, business-oriented bot and leverage that to make those conversations even easier to understand. And in fact, they actually learn over time as more people use the infrastructure. It works across applications, as you'll see. So Microsoft Teams is a really great integration if we do say so ourselves, but there's a number of other different applications that are going to be coming as well. It's also open and extensible, so you can see other applications and other people integrating with SAP Copilot over time. So we're pleased to announce that SAP Copilot has a planned availability coming soon in Microsoft Teams, so that you can actually work inside of Microsoft Teams and you can get a number of different common business operations all accessible to you inside of Microsoft Teams. So in this case, for example, somebody's ordering some custom hardware, they're able to pick out their laptop, choose a couple of options through rich cards, and away they go and they're done. So no complicated forms for that. And so the whole range of a number of different SAP products will be exposed through SAP Copilot. Now, architecturally, it works the way you might imagine, which is they've got this really great infrastructure in the middle, which is SAP Copilot, which does all of that digital assistant management. It does the natural language understanding. It connects it to back-end SAP systems and allows you to authenticate with those. And it also learns over time and builds those skills so that what works for a SAP Copilot bot for one company may be different for a different one. And then what it does is it abstracts it across a number of different systems, and Microsoft Teams is a great one for that. Now, on the back end, what they do is they have SAP Copilot. It'll connect to a number of different systems. So in this case, it was SuccessFactors, where I was working with my timesheet, but then it's also available in a number of other different systems. So for example, next year when you come to Ignite, hopefully you can talk to your SAP Copilot bot and book a flight through Concur, and you'll be off to the races and book everything right in time to get the best hotels. Now, the way that this works, though, in terms of how SAP Copilot integrates with Teams, they have basically a siloed multi-tenant architecture so that every company's individual bot actually runs in an independent way through the Microsoft Teams chat service. So conversations that you have with your SAP Copilot bot are appropriately isolated in a multi-tenant world that we live in. So with SAP Copilot, it's now available in preview. They have a sign-up program, so if you're interested in working with this, giving feedback, there's an early preview program that you can register to be considered for joining. It's called the Customer Engagement Initiative, and so the benefit of this is they've got a really great infrastructure for making sure that you can really directly influence product management. It's done in a great legally safe environment. You can see what other people are saying and really get that great conversation going about different bots. And really help SAP with their beta testing process. So if you're interested, you can go to influence.sap.com. There's a program number for this. It's 2018384. It's the SAP Copilot for Microsoft Teams. So definitely sign up if you're working for a company that has SAP infrastructure. If you're interested in trying this out, we really think that being able to have access to all that key critical enterprise data from SAP will be a huge game changer in terms of interacting with software, interacting with Microsoft Teams. Now, just to zoom in just a quick second, let's go show you a different example of how you can actually go build your own bot if you so choose. So if you've never built a bot before, essentially a bot is kind of like a web service. Essentially every part of a conversation is manifested as another sort of call to your web service. You're given the string of what a user has said, and then you're able to use different natural language tools. Lewis is one of them from Microsoft that can actually decode that into a more recognizable command that you can take action on. So in my case, I'm going to be in Microsoft Teams, and I've built this bot called the Graph Bot, like so. And I can say check find all PPTX files, like so. So I can issue some very simple commands. And what's going to happen here is this makes that web service call to my bot web service. My bot web service will go decode this find all PPTX files string into something that's natural language. And then what it does is it uses Microsoft Graph APIs to go call back into my company to go find all of the presentations that are interesting. Now, I have not a lot of interesting ones. They're all named Presentation 1 and 2. But it'll do things like find files inside of zip files in addition. Now, I can do essentially with this bot, a lot of things that you can do through Microsoft Graph, and we'll talk about Microsoft Graph later, but I can say, when is my next appointment? Like that. And so what's going to happen behind the scenes, if you scroll up, let me go show you, when is my next meeting, excuse me. It'll say your next meeting is the product engineering stand-up at 9 a.m. In this particular meeting room that we have. It doesn't know the difference between appointment and meeting yet, so I need to make that bot a little smarter in that regard. Okay, so now I can say, GraphBot, schedule a meeting with Ben. Now, the cool thing that this is going to do is it's going to actually use the Microsoft Graph APIs, and one of the things that Microsoft Graph has is a disambiguation service called People. So what this does is it finds people across my contacts, my Active Directory, my mail to find when someone says schedule a meeting with Ben, what's the possible set of Bens that might be relevant to Mike, to me. And it's actually going to rank them. So in this case, Ben Summers, he's on my team. So when I say schedule a meeting with Ben, I mean this Ben Summers over here. The other thing that this bot is going to do is it's going to take advantage of some APIs in Graph to do a disambiguation of time slots that work for the two of us. So in this case, I'm going to use a card to select 9:30 a.m. And so now what this will then do is use Graph to go put a calendar invite on our calendars, and now it's scheduled a simple, quick meeting. So just to show you what this looks like in terms of building a bot itself, when you build a bot in Teams, there's a simple registration packaging format that has all the metadata about what your bot is and the identifier and those kinds of things. You can use the Microsoft Bot Framework, and we have upcoming support for Bot Framework 4 that will make it even easier. But fundamentally, the actual code itself is really, as I mentioned, just a number of different APIs that we have available. So in this case, for example, when I asked, when is my next meeting, this is the actual code behind the scenes. Let me go minimize that real quick. And what you can see here is we're just taking the natural language conversation and we're converting it into a web service back to Microsoft Graph. Then we're going to go take all the available times and decode the different JSON that goes into it, and then respond in kind of a human language back to the bot service to go say, okay, here's when the next meeting is available at. And let me just go show you this. When I say go schedule a meeting with Ben, there's a simple web service that will take our beta people APIs and actually make a query back to Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph then in turn returns a sorted list of all the Bens that I know, and then I can go convert that into an adaptive card so that somebody can make a choice about which Ben I think that I should schedule a meeting with. So in this case, building a bot, you can see, of course, there's a lot of sophistication in the kinds of natural language user interfaces that SAP Copilot has built. But in a simple way, if you want to get started with a very simple bot, you see it's really just intercepting web services and processing some commands, and away you go. You've got this great Commander bot that's available to you. Sure. Yeah. I think because the bot is doing it on my behalf, because before this I'd actually already signed into the bot, and there's a bot authentication in the sample code that we have. Because I'd signed in, it's doing it on my behalf, so I wouldn't have to sign in. Okay, so bots is just one facet of the conversation that's available for you to develop against in Microsoft Teams. We expect that you can use all facets of the conversation to make teamwork more productive. In fact, there's a number of different developer technologies that are available in Teams, not just bots, but also things like tabs and actionable messages, being able to extend the activity feed, being able to change how conversations happen directly inside of Microsoft Teams. Let me show you something very quickly. Hopefully quickly.
I switched it. It's okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so just to show you this very quickly, the other thing I can do is in the middle of my conversation, I can use what's called a compose extension. And I can very quickly just pull up, wrong one. So I can find Adobe Creative Cloud. So Adobe Creative Cloud, they've built an integration with Microsoft Teams. So I can go say, maybe I've got this Ninja graphic that I'm working on that's stored in Adobe Creative Cloud. I can say, let's go pull in this one. And I can have this conversation about it. I can say, does this look good for stickers? Like so. And so now we can have conversations around these rich objects directly inside of Microsoft Teams. I can extend the number of commands that are available to me. So you can do some very powerful things straight inside of Microsoft Teams by building those compose extensions and change how conversations really flow. Just another quick example. But the other example I'll mention is that you can build tabs as well. So tabs are things that complement the conversation experience. They're manifested at the top of your screen inside of Microsoft Teams, and you can use them to basically pull in web pages, pull in dashboards, pull in additional visual tools. They can tie into conversations as well. So essentially inside of Microsoft Teams, you can always keep people straight inside of context. You know, everything is really at their fingertips, quite literally. And because tabs are based on web pages, you know, anything you can build with a web page or any project you've built before, you can actually pretty easily integrate inside of Microsoft Teams. The final thing I'll mention is this concept of personal applications. So not only can you work as a team with different types of applications, but all of those technologies are available to you as a personal app. So for example, if I'm having a chat with my HR person, and they want to, you know, maybe discuss a potential job candidate, we can bring in tabs that have that person's job profile straight into our conversation, and I can work with those applications, you know, on my own time as well. So that was a very brief whirlwind tour of Microsoft Teams. You can get started by building a bot or a Compose extension, but there's a lot of different extension points across Teams. Now at Microsoft Ignite, we have a number of new things that are available to you as developers. We have an app catalog for enterprises so they can offer their own applications out to their staff. We're improving bot support with Bot Builder v4 and file integrations inside of Microsoft Teams. Graph APIs, this is a huge one. Now it's possible with Graph APIs and Microsoft Teams to create a completely provisioned custom experience with custom tabs and other integrations inside of a team. So if you want to give people a really tailored experience, the Graph APIs let you set that up for people so that people don't actually have to go do their own assembly of different tools into one space. Or also a huge effort is on extending video and voice chat experiences as well that you can take advantage of. So if you're interested in more sessions, there's a dedicated session on voice and video chat that you can go see, where they'll drill in on all the new things that are available if you're interested in those technologies. There's a deep dive on building Teams applications, as well as a level 200 level on building Teams applications. So if you're interested in the entire landscape of everything with Microsoft Teams, there's a number of different choices here. In addition, there's theaters and a hands-on lab so that you can get started as well, all throughout the rest of the week. Okay, so next up, it'll be Wei talking to you about how you can actually streamline workflows with adaptive cards.
Yes, thanks, Mike. I just think that it's great that we are able to do so many awesome things with Teams, but there's another application that's regularly used that some of you may have heard of. It's Microsoft Outlook. And there are a bunch of things that you can do there as well. And the thing that we'll be focusing on, at least in this talk, is streamlining your workflows. So just by show of hands, how many of you have ever maybe gotten an email that asks you to go approve something or leave and complete some other task in another system? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, probably most of you. Now, how many of you, right when you got that email and you read it, went and completed that task instantaneously, right in that moment? Exactly. Most people are in the middle of doing their work, they're not ready to leave, and they just want to take an action quickly. So if you're like me, you might say, I'll do it later. And it might get done later. But the point is that causes some problems. So the idea behind these adaptive cards in email is that you can streamline these workflows. And I'm going to dive right in, actually, and start by showing you an example of an actionable message, and then I'll talk a little bit more in detail about them. So this example that you're seeing here is Sage, and it's a timesheet example here. So you can imagine that as a company, if you have contractors that work maybe with another organization like Contoso on a project, every hour that they work on a specific project needs to be logged. And at the end of the 2 weeks, maybe, I, as the manager, would need to go ahead and improve those hours. So you could send me an email that says, hey, the hours have been inputted. Click this link to go approve. Or you could streamline that workflow with this adaptive card. So what you're seeing here is our adaptive card, and it's showing me that 3 employees have submitted their hours. And I have the option to just click this button right here. It's going to make a call, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to approve it. And when that happens, it's going to tell me that all of those statuses have now been approved. So if I were to come back to this email, and there's no confusion about whether or not I've completed this task, and I never had to leave. All right, so switching back. Why an actionable message? Well, we think that there's many reasons to utilize an actionable message. you can take those quick actions, and some partners that we've been working with have already created those through commenting on tasks in Wunderlist or setting a due date in Trello. And the idea behind it is to enable task completion in an effortless way. And from a developer perspective, the great news is this is JSON markup. It's a declarative model. You don't need code. You write this JSON, you add it into the header of an email, and what happens is it's going to run across all of the Outlook clients, whether that's Outlook on the web, whether that's Win32, if it's Mac. And it also will adjust the user experience so that you don't have to worry about any of those changes, so that it feels like it's a part of that specific client. But if you're still not sold, I can share some examples with you of how that success has been within our organization of Microsoft. So we went ahead and used our actionable message platform to work with expense approvals and SharePoint access. And in regards to SharePoint access, we saw 4 times the engagement in granting that access. And when we look at our approvals, what used to take about 6 days to get that approval happening only takes less than a day now. And on top of that, saves us about $1.5 million in late fees. And finally, just on an individual user basis, we get feedback like this. When terms like magical are used, it just makes you feel great. You know that the users can understand and that it's valuable to them. So here's a list of some of the other partners and some of the other integrations that have been done with these adaptive cards that'll be around at Ignite. But if you're wondering, how do I get started with this? There are 3 simple steps. You design a card, you send it to yourself to see what it looks like, and then you wire up those actions. So, show of hands again, how many of you guys in the room are developers? Maybe not developers? What about not developers? So there's a little bit of both here. We have 2 options in how you could go ahead and get started, and I'm gonna show you both. If you're a developer, we have a message card playground here. What this does is it surfaces some different samples for you. You can come in and you can make changes. So I could say, let's see, instead of Leo Adams, I can say, Mike added a card. Right? And I can do all of this live. I can add the different actions that I want to take in here, see what it's going to look like. And then if I was logged into my own account, I can go ahead and click send email, and it will send it, and so I can see what it will look like in Win32, in Mac, in Outlook on the web. And this is aka.ms message card playground. There's another option, though, if you're maybe not a developer. So this is where we're going to finish. Just wanted to show you. I figured since we're at Ignite, it would be great if maybe there were actionable messages that allowed you to create that evaluation. But this is our adaptive cards designer. And what it allows you to do is drag and drop blocks. So I can say, okay, let me drag in my text blocks here. And I say, Ignite session evaluation. Maybe I'm thinking, well, this is going to be the title, so I want to make it larger, bold. And then underneath that, I want to go ahead and add some more detail. So we're going to come over here and say, please evaluate our session. So next, what do I need? I'm going to need to provide some choices here. So I've cheated a little bit on this one because I didn't want to go through and manually type all of that out and make you guys watch me. But we have this editor down here as well that allows you to make changes. I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. Now what it did right there was it was smart. It said you have a lot of options. Maybe you should consider a compact style, but I'm going to go away from that and just surface the options for how valuable the session was. I may additionally want to add some room for comment. This is the key piece. This is how we determine how we can improve. So I'm going to add that in. And then the last piece is they need a way to submit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my action set, add an action, select on it, and say, I want to add a submit button here. And just like that, I've gone ahead and created the adaptive card, and with relatively minimal coding experience required. Now, you could also go through and add the URLs and et cetera and continue to build it out. So both of these are two options for you to go ahead and get started building out these adaptive cards. Okay. Okay. We talked about actionable messages. Outlook extensibility, that's not the only piece of extensibility that's available. We have 3 in total that we generally focus on. The first piece are Outlook add-ins, and I'm going to talk a little bit about add-ins later on through the lens of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, but I wanted to call out that they are also available in Outlook. We have actionable messages, which use the adaptive cards framework, and that's what we spent most of this part discussing. And then finally, we have this piece, this kind of bit of foundation, a way to enrich those experiences using Microsoft Graph, which Mike will talk about a little bit later. So with that, I wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of what's new when it comes to actionable messages, Outlook add-ins, and Graph in the context of Outlook. So I showed you the adaptive card designer. We also have created some templates, so if you are using flights or a restaurant, you can provide us with the data, and we'll go ahead and fit that into our template that we've already created. And then finally, the ability to refresh cards before a user views it. So let's say Mike was also a manager in that Sage demo that we had, and we both got that need for approval, but only one of us needs to approve. Let's assume he got to it first and he already approved it. When I go ahead and click on that message, it's not going to need to wait to show me that it was approved. It's already going to be there. I'm going to click on it. Oh, it's already done. I don't need to do anything.
With SharePoint permissions, it's kind of like the new game. It's like, am I the one to approve it first, or did someone else actually approve it before me? And I always lose that game. It's kind of cool to see, actually.
Yeah, so then now you have that real-time update. And then we have Outlook add-ins. So one of the most requested things with Outlook add-ins is access to delegate access. So previously, if you had an administrator who had access to your items, the add-in was not available. It's now in preview for Mac and Win32. And we've been continuing to add new APIs with requirement set 1.7, which is focused around things like recurrence, another one of our most requested APIs. But also, we've added some new APIs around attachments into our preview. And then finally with Graph, we added some free busy data information and some information around headers and MIME content of messages. All right, so in terms of Outlook, these are the sessions that you may find valuable. The bottom one will be a deep dive on these adaptive cards. And that's how you can streamline your workflows within email. So we talked about conversations. What about if I'm creating content? What can I do? So you can leverage add-ins to allow content to be brought in to each of these different places, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. So I'm going to switch over to Word. And for those of you who may never have used an add-in, we have a store where you can go and you can search. So today the add-in I will be demoing is Litera. So if I were to search for a specific add-in, I'll see the list of available options, or I could just scroll through and find what works for me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch Litera. What is Litera? Well, basically, it is going to take a look at this document, this contract that I've already written up, and it's going to analyze it for risks. What this means is maybe I am someone who just copies and pastes the old agreement. So if I make changes and update, there's a lot of different places where those changes may be required, and I don't want to miss any of them and send them out incorrectly. So this task pane opens up on the right-hand side and tells me, hey, these are all of the mistakes or weird places that you need to look at. So I'm just going to click one. And it actually takes me to that spot in the Word document. We're using Office.js APIs here. And it says, hey, you wrote out 1 million, but you actually put 100,000. So now, to avoid that mistake, I can go ahead and make that change. Now, in a session specifically devoted to Office add-ins later on, Litera will go through their entire solution more in depth, explaining exactly how they've built it and how it works. So if you're interested, you can check that out. It's on Wednesday. But for now, I'm going to switch back over and say, now that you've seen an add-in, let me tell you a little bit more about them. So add-ins, there are 3 main large parts or things, big takeaways with add-ins. The first piece is that it's built on web technologies, HTML, JavaScript, CSS. The next piece is that when you build an add-in, they work cross-platform. So whether that's on Mac, Win32, or Excel Online, for example. And finally, we've built a modern distribution story. So if any of you may have used COM in the past, this distribution story is much more seamless. So there are two ways that we go ahead and provide distribution. The first is through the Office Store, which I showed you in the Latera example. And the second is, let's say you know that your organization, everyone within it, or maybe just a specific department like legal, would need to use the Latera add-in. You can go through and add all of the necessary people and deploy it to them specifically so they don't have to go search for it or acquire it. Okay. So I mentioned web technologies. When you're building an Office add-in, there are two main pieces. The manifest, which tells you where it should be, what's going to happen when you press on that button. And then there's your own web app, which is also leveraging the Office.js APIs. And together that will build you a solution. So one way to think about the building blocks behind an Office add-in are, first, the extension points. So those blue sections that were highlighted, there are different ways that you can extend the canvas. You can have an add-in command that's going to appear in the ribbon. You could create your own tab, custom tab, where you control all your actions. Or you could even add a custom function, which I'll show you in a little bit. So once you've decided where you're going to extend, you then have to define what type of container that is. What's it going to do when I press that button? Is it going to show me a task pane? Is it going to show that dialogue? It could even just execute some JavaScript. And then finally, the last piece is the web view. So that's the place where you control. That's where the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript is going to be. That's the space that you are in charge of showing the user experience for. And we do actually provide through Office UI Fabric some ways for you to make it feel like it fits more closely with Office. All right. So custom functions is one of the newer things that we're very excited about. Custom functions basically provide you a way to create your own custom JavaScript functions and install them through an add-in into Excel. So I've gone ahead and created an add-in. And I'm going to show you this nth prime. Does anyone know the 5th nth prime? No? So what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and compute that. It's already defined for me. It just computed it. And just like I could use the sum functionality in Excel, it's in the same, I access it in the same native way. And so there could be other examples that may be interesting. Maybe you're in finance and you want to know the stock price, right? So, and maybe we say, we want to know the stock price of Microsoft. And it will tell you that as well. Now, we did a lot of work specifically around the performance aspect of this. So if I were to come here and maybe I wanted to have a bunch of cells that were going to compute the nth prime, I would say, I want you to refer to the column over. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and just to give you an example, I'm going to show you that it does really pretty well with our computations. And obviously, with the nth prime, that's some pretty big computation there. So yeah, this is a really great way to provide specific custom solutions for within your organization. For more on custom functions, there's a session on Wednesday, Excel Solution Palooza, that will talk about it more in depth. Okay, so with that, what's new with add-ins in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint? We've been working really hard on single sign-on and Edge Web View. We've also, again, been adding a lot of APIs to Excel. We've released 1.7 and 1.8 to GA, with 1.9 in preview. And for any developers who are not aware, we also offer a tool called Script Lab that can be installed from the Office Store, where you can actually go, it's an add-in, and see the task pane there. And try out the different APIs, the ones that are in preview and specific ones that have already shipped. And then we have custom functions, which I just shared, and admin usage reports. In terms of relevant sessions throughout the rest of your time here, here is the list for Excel. And with that, we kind of talked about extending the canvas. I'm going to move away from the creativity of an add-in into how you can actually enrich those experiences more with Microsoft Graph.
Thank you, awesome stuff. So when you're building applications and integrations with Office, frequently you're going to want to pull in some data to go along with that. And as I mentioned, certainly when it comes to everything in Office 365, we're working to expose that through Microsoft Graph. And so one of the things that you'll want to do as you build your own applications is harness data in a similar way. So just to go ahead and get started with this, let's go.
One more.
Right. It's backwards. So, as I mentioned, you can think of Office 365 really as a set of building blocks, things like file support, things like tasks, that are common things that you'll probably want to go build in your own applications, but rather than building your own file storage system based on top of blob stores in Azure, why not take advantage of what's there inside of SharePoint, for example, or take advantage of tasks from Planner so that you get a centralized way to manage them, and then you don't have to build that compliant infrastructure yourself. So one example of this is just a simple demo application called Property Manager. So Property Manager is a Xamarin application, so this is something that's designed to run across Windows and iOS and Android. Here I'm running the Windows version. Now in this case what I'll do is when I first starts up, I'm going to want to be able to sign in. Once you sign in using Azure Active Directory sign-in, using one of the sign-in libraries that are available for it, then you get a graph token. And once you get that graph token, you can first identify who the user is in a verifiable way. But then secondly, you can actually use that to access more data and connect to everything that's available inside of Microsoft Graph. So in this case, I'm just going to go sign in like so. It's going to go connect and pop up a dialog, and depending on the device, since I'm in Xamarin, it'll pop up a dialog that works for that form factor. In this case, I'm going to say, here is my test account. By the way, I've got a developer test account, mikeamm.onmicrosoft.com. I got that from the Office Developer Program. So if you want to do your own graph development, if you sign up for the developer program, you get like a free tenancy that you can use to actually go do your own development. So it's better to write code against a test environment than to write against your own production environment. So I highly recommend, as you work with Microsoft Graph, go get your own account. And you get basically your own full Office 365 tenancy for doing development work. Now once I've signed in, this will take me into the application experience, and I've got now that access to a number of different APIs. Now, in this case, we've got a number of properties that we're managing, and each property is a very important thing. There's a lot of time that we spend on them. We want to make sure that they are well-maintained and those kinds of things. So in this case, we've got 320 Madison Street. I'm going to go click on it like this. And this application gives us some very basic metadata. It's the sort of store for all the different properties around this. You can see a number of different things like how big it is and what the square footage is and those kinds of things. But more importantly, I can actually go ahead and have conversations around this. I can say, this property needs work, like so, and click send. Now, this user experience is not very great looking, but you can imagine how it could be better with more fluent UX technologies. The other thing you can do is actually go ahead and add files. So in this case, of course, with every property that we have, we're going to want to go store some documents and the like. In this case, maybe an acquisition proposal to go acquire it from Northwind. And what's going to happen here is that this is going to get uploaded, so you can see it in the list over here. Now, the way this works is that this application is tied into this concept of an Office 365 group. If you know the architecture of Office 365, at the core of it is the concept of a group. And various things like Teams conversations and SharePoint files and Planner tasks hang off the group. And so what I'm doing here is I'm associating every property that we have with that group, and then I get all those collaboration capabilities, quote unquote, for free. So if I actually go over to, let me go skip back over. If I skip over to SharePoint, you can see that because it's a group, there's actually a SharePoint site here. And then essentially all of the documents that you see that are listed are available. In fact, that Northwood acquisition proposal that I uploaded, SharePoint now is aware of it. It's now tracked inside of SharePoint. And so there's this alternate experience for working with these files that's now available. So this is a very interesting and I think very useful pattern, this idea of using groups in Office 365 as a dumping ground for your content for things like conversations and tasks and files. It doesn't sound super glamorous, but the benefit of it is, again, you don't have to build that infrastructure yourself. You get compliance. You get this alternate user experience, and it really will benefit all of your customers that use Office 365. Now, to make this even easier to build, one of the things that we've done is actually build some controls that are available to you in UWP. So let's go hit F5 on this project. So we have something called the Windows Community Toolkit, which is an open source project of a number of UWP-rich controls. So a lot of really great things like some simple charts and some simple user experience tools that you can use in any kind of UWP application. But one of the things that we've built is some controls for working with Microsoft Graph. So in this case, there's a login control. The login control automatically provides a user experience that handles the process of somebody logging in. So all I need to do is provide the client identifier of my application like so. And now when I click this button, you can imagine this in the upper right-hand corner of your application. This is the sign-in profile card that you commonly see. Now, because I've already signed into this application, I did get a dialog that prompted up for my name and password. It just automatically pulled and connected and pulled in my profile information. So that's one control. But we also have controls like a SharePoint file list. So if you're building a UWP application, if you want access to files, you can simply glue this in, if you will, like so. And then you can go connect it to different file storage that's available inside of Office 365. So in this case, I'm going to enter the graph URL that corresponds to my OneDrive folder, /me/drive. Talk about graph URLs in just a second. And I'm going to click Load Drive. And what this control will do is it'll actually provide a very rich control that has all the files that are in my OneDrive. You can click on different files to see different metadata about them. So in this case, there's a survey that I've got here. SurveyMonkey, for example, integrates with OneDrive, so that's what that corresponds to. When I click on knee MRIs, maybe I'm a clinician who's working with different types of X-ray scans. OneDrive has over 300 different file previewers and things that are available to generate thumbnails. And you can actually take advantage of that through Microsoft Graph to pull in renderings of different types of file formats. So in this case, an X-ray machine has I think it's DCOM file format associated with it. I can go select that file and then pull back from OneDrive through Graph that image-based preview of somebody's busted up knee. So you can see how you can actually make some really rich controls. And this is available for you to actually go incorporate into your UWP applications, again, through that Windows Community Toolkit, which is open source. We've actually added a number of additional controls. So there's a Power BI control for integrating charts. There's another control for integrating tasks as well. So you can integrate those different components into your application. Now, to get started with Microsoft Graph, many of you have probably seen that, but it starts in two places. First, whenever you start with Microsoft Graph, you're going to want to go to apps.dev.microsoft.com. This is kind of a registry of client identifiers. This is how you identify your application to the world. You basically click Add an Application and fill out some basic metadata. You say, here's the kinds of permissions we're going to want to go use. We're going to want to access somebody's files. We're going to want to access maybe their enhanced profile information. Then when a user signs in using this identifier that you're going to get back, they're going to get prompted, do you want to grant permission for the user to access these different individual properties? So apps.dev.microsoft.com has that simple registry. There's also a version of this experience in your Azure portal as well, so you can go in that direction if you so choose. But apps.dev.microsoft.com is pretty quick and easy. Now, the other thing you should definitely know about is the Graph Explorer. So some of you have seen this before, but it bears repeating that Graph Explorer is also probably your first stop on building any type of graph application. So what this allows you to do is go see all of the different properties and schemas for different types of data types that are available through Microsoft Graph. So there's a whole sample gallery on the left-hand side here. In fact, you can actually add additional samples because there's just too many to show on any one page. So for example, if I want to work with Microsoft Excel, let's go pull in some Excel samples over here. Let's see, where'd Excel go? So for example, I can find, give me all the tables in a worksheet. So if I've got that custom function worksheet where I'm calculating primes, I can actually go grab the data from that spreadsheet and actually use that inside of my application because Excel is exposed through Microsoft Graph. But also very common things like, for example, every application needs a bit of profile information. You want to show a person's name, you want to show their picture. So in this case, I can call graph.microsoft.com/v1.0/me, and what I'll get back is some JSON that provides some key information about that person. And in this case, what it's doing is Graph Explorer is using some sample data, but you can also sign in with your personal account, your test account, your work account to get more information about that. So Microsoft Graph, it's a REST API, and there's a lot here in this tool that you can actually experiment and get started in working with. And as I mentioned, the set of experiences and data that comes from Microsoft is growing every single day. Okay, so yeah, this really sums it up. We really do see Microsoft Graph as this central gateway where, a clearinghouse, if you will, where all data through a number of different products, including Office 365 and Windows and EMS, is exposed in one consistent fashion. You've seen it in the bot that I showed you earlier. We had that bot that gave you a little bit of scheduling information, but you can also build it inside of web applications. You can build background daemon processes and those kinds of things. And it's built on Azure Active Directory Identity. So as long as your application knows Azure Active Directory Identity, which any sort of cloud Microsoft application probably does, you're off to the races. You've got that graph token. You can do some very powerful things. There's other services, by the way, that are also exposed on Microsoft Graph. So it's not just REST APIs. There's concepts of webhooks. So for example, anytime somebody gets added to a group, a webhook will fire, and your application can intercept that and do something. Anytime a file gets uploaded, you can intercept that through a webhook as well, so that you can actually build a custom business process on top of working with those files. So there's a number of webhooks in addition that are used in a number of places for actually kickstarting workflows. Now, Microsoft Graph is a REST API, and we think it's, we're pretty proud of it, that it's pretty simple and straightforward to use. If you've ever parsed JSON before, you can go ahead and do that. But in addition, there are also a number of different Graph SDKs to make it even more productive to work with. Whether you're developing in .NET or Java or JavaScript, on Android or on iOS, there's an SDK that wraps the process and makes it easier to call into different Graph APIs. So that's one whole service there. Now at Ignite, we're actually adding a major new scenario for working with Microsoft Graph. So REST APIs are really great for doing kind of real-time operations. A user has signed in, go find their profile information, those kinds of things that are needed to support applications. But a lot of times what you want to do is actually go and build insights on top of data. And to do that, you need to mix it and merge it with different information about a person, maybe about some facets of who they work with and those kinds of things. So to do that, we have a new feature and capability called Microsoft Graph Data Connect. Now, the kinds of things that you can build with Microsoft Data Connect are numerous across your organization. I think we definitely see that every company probably has some hidden insight that they need to unlock to really transform their business. And usually you're going to get that by looking at big data, looking across your data sources, connecting them together, and really looking for the next generation insights around them. So in this case, you can build a better CRM by looking at the interaction patterns of your salespeople. You can connect employees with people who might be good mentors or the right levels of expertise in your organization. You can transform your product strategy by mixing in data about how your projects are going and the different types of deliverables that they have, along with employee information. You can really also use it to streamline operations. And so for those insights, we have a number of different tools for that. We have a concept called Workplace Analytics for actually building employee engagement, which is a finished project that's also extensible. So if you're doing anything to find how to make your employees more productive, you can use Workplace Analytics for that. There's insight applications for sales and for other different types of horizontal and vertical workloads that you can use. We have a number of different data sources in Power BI that are also available for building custom insights in a dashboard. But then finally, we have Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And this is a tool where developers and analysts can actually grab the data inside of Azure and actually build things on top of it. So the idea behind this is, let's take the data that's available in Microsoft Graph, let's give all the tools to an administrator to allow them to make very careful and informed decisions about the kinds of applications that they're going to go build. Let's go build this inside of Azure, so you're getting all the compliance benefits and all the management benefits of this data being made accessible inside of Azure in a customer's tenancy. And so the idea is that an administrator, they get the ability to give very granular consent. They get the security and governance of Azure. They can expose data at scale to different types of applications. And then you as a developer, you can actually take that data inside of Azure in the tools of your choice, for example, Hadoop, Azure Data Lake, those kinds of things, and mix it together and build your own analytical applications. So that's the idea behind Microsoft Graph Data Connect. It's really this idea of taking the data in Microsoft Graph, and rather than accessing it through a REST API, you're getting it in bulk inside of Azure with a whole suite of administrator tools to make sure that that data stays in compliance. So if you're familiar with building, Azure data analytical products, working with those Azure tools, this is a really great boon. It provides, a new set of information that you can go work with. So at Ignite, Microsoft Graph Data Connect is in public preview, so you can actually go and try it and kick the tires and go work with the different types of data sets that Microsoft Graph Data Connect exposes. We're also adding a new service on top of Microsoft Graph called Graph Notifications. With a Graph Notification, you can actually, deliver notifications to iOS, to Android, to other different platforms using our infrastructure, which simplifies your time to build it. And I think over time, we're going to add more sophistication to make sure that the right notifications get to the right people at the right time. You don't need to manage that yourself. So it's a new facility. So rather than implementing for the notifications on iOS and for Android and those kinds of things, do it in one place through Graph Notifications. That's a great way to get started. As I mentioned, Microsoft Dynamics APIs are now available for finance in Microsoft Graph, which is the start of hopefully many new APIs that get exposed there. And then there's a number of new APIs across a number of different products. Most importantly, Microsoft Teams is making a number of APIs generally available, but also adding some new beta APIs to really expand out the set. So there are a number of sessions at Microsoft Ignite for working with Microsoft Graph. It is the API that's at the core of a lot of developer experiences, so it probably follows that there's going to be a lot of sessions around it. You can work with mail, calendar, and contact APIs in a session on Tuesday. The Microsoft Intelligence Platform, that's really that session for working with Microsoft Graph Data Connect and building new applications with data in bulk. Microsoft Graph Data is really at the key of business processes. For example, when new files get uploaded, kick off a workflow, and you'll find out more about how you can build those with streamlining your business processes. And then there's kind of the overall Microsoft Graph session. That's BRK3310, Microsoft Graph, the API for Microsoft 365, which will be a great, undoubtedly great, sort of world tour of everything with Microsoft Graph. There's a number of theaters as well for you to go ahead and get started with that in addition. A cool one about Graph and AI, that should be pretty interesting. Okay, so finally, last but not least, definitely not least, one of the most common things that we see customers doing is looking to actually put information inside of SharePoint. Across so many different organizations, there's this technology called communication sites in SharePoint. People design portals for their entire company, for specific organizations, and across, even for specific teams. A SharePoint site is kind of the face of a team to the rest of the organization. So people put a lot of tender loving care, so to speak, into actually what their team sites look like and what they do. And so what you can do as a developer is extend SharePoint to bring in new tools, to bring in data analysis inside of it to make those SharePoint sites that much more relevant and interesting. So let me show you how. So one of the new things that we've introduced, as I mentioned earlier, was something called SharePoint Starter Kit. And what SharePoint Starter Kit does is it's really a package of about a dozen different web parts pulled together into a provisioning engine so that what it makes it easy to do is take those dozen very useful web parts, push them into your SharePoint environment, create really beautiful portals that are really functional as well. So let me show you what that looks like. So in this case, we have our Contoso portal. This is a communication site that is built inside of our SharePoint tenancy, and it's got a number of different web parts here. So you can see that this hero web part is one of the key features. There's a tile grid web part over here for launching different instructions, and there's a number of new web parts, for example, stock and weather, and some clocks, things like time clocks so that you know what's going on across your organization. So these are just some very basic web parts that are put into this portal. The other thing that SharePoint Starter Kit does is it delivers this custom footer. A lot of times companies want to put their legalese, so to speak, or different types of disclaimers or new tools into the headers and footers of their SharePoint sites. And you can do that with SharePoint customization as well. So in this case, we have a custom menu command here that provides access to different websites that you can use from there. Okay. But in addition, SharePoint Starter Kit also comes with a number of different graph web parts. So here I've got a personal portal, and there's a number of different web parts that will pull in my different recent documents, my emails, maybe some upcoming meetings that I have and some sites that I'm following. These are all correspond to different Microsoft Graph APIs that contain this information, but the result of this is that I get a really nice custom portal with the information that's relevant just to me. But then finally, what you can also do is you can build your own custom web parts. So in this case, I have a lead management system, which is exposed as a web service in Azure. And what this web part does is it actually pulls in the information about my leads directly into my SharePoint portal so that all the relevant lead information is right here at my fingertips inside of my SharePoint site. So just looking at the code for this, this is the personal calendar component that you see here. So SharePoint Framework is essentially a technology that allows you to go ahead and use modern JavaScript and TypeScript libraries and infrastructures and streamline the process of getting that over into SharePoint. So if you're familiar with Angular or React, more React, I guess I would say, the idea behind that is to make it easy to take that code and push it into SharePoint as JavaScript. So in this case, that calendar component that shows my personal calendar, it's implemented as React.js. And if you're familiar with React.js, I like to think that React.js kind of reminds me of XAML in that what it really allows you to do is have a templating language for describing your user interface and then bind that template to actual code that sits behind the scenes. So it looks a little bit like XAML to me anyway, into C#. So this is my React component for that personal calendar that we showed earlier. There's a number of different imports here. And in this case, I'm importing some custom components from Office UI Fabric React, which is our library of custom React controls here. And then I have my class, which is my personal calendar, and this actually implements the functionality of my calendar. Now, one of the things that we've recently made available is the ability to call Microsoft Graph APIs from SharePoint Framework. So this is done through a component called Graph Client. So here you can see what I'm doing is I'm making a graph call to go fetch some calendar information. And then what happens is when I get that result back, I'm going to call this setState operation. In React is basically about automatically updating your user experience anytime state changes. So by taking the result of that calendar request and setting the state with it, I automatically cause my user interface to go update and show those calendar appointments. And then just going a little bit lower here into the actual markup, excuse me for this, there's a render function here. And what it's going to render is a div tag with a number of subcomponents, like a web part title component, and then it's going to go and render a different list that's bound to the results that I have that come back from my Graph API. So again, looks maybe a little XAML-y if you've ever done that kind of coding. But you can see I'm interleaving a lot of template code in with some custom TypeScript as well. So this is just one framework that you can bring in, but we also always work to try to support different frameworks. We work with folks at Google, for example, to make Angular more compatible with pulling in through SharePoint Framework, so there's some good practices there. But if you're using Handlebars or any of the other JavaScript frameworks, if you're doing web development, you know that this stuff is really evolving rapidly. So we're trying to make sure that SharePoint Framework can support any kind of development now and in the future. SharePoint Framework is also the technology that we use to build all of our out-of-the-box web parts in addition. So, hopefully that will give you confidence that we're hopefully finding all the bugs before you do, and we're using it to build all of our experiences as well. And the final thing I'll say is that it also works in mobile devices. So it takes advantage of React responsive techniques to make sure that web parts can render on mobile devices when people are looking at things through a web browser in addition. Now, web parts are a key tool for SharePoint Framework, but there's also a concept called SharePoint Framework extensions, which, as I showed you earlier, allow you to customize the header and the footer and some of the list views that you see inside of SharePoint. So we are looking to support the ability for you to take JavaScript code and extend the different facets of SharePoint Chrome in very rich and deep ways. A little bit on Rails. We don't want you customizing all of it and going completely hog wild. But there are a lot of key scenarios that we support through SharePoint Framework extensions, adding new menu options, adding headers and footers, and the like. Now at Microsoft Ignite, the major thing that we're talking about is how you can bring your SharePoint Framework into Microsoft Teams. So those SharePoint web parts that we showed you earlier, like that lead management system, you will soon be able to actually take that web part and host it inside of Teams as a tab with very little customization required. So you can write your code once, and anywhere there's a team collaboration experience, you can expose that web part, that code, directly into Teams and into SharePoint. And in addition to that, there's also a way to take tabs that have been built inside of Microsoft Teams and host them back inside of SharePoint. So trying to get it to this point where you can write the code using the tools of your choice. If you've got a very simple web page, you can bring it into Teams tabs in SharePoint. If you want to write a lot of code from scratch, SharePoint Framework is a good choice for that. Just making it very flexible to write once and run in multiple different locations across Microsoft 365. Now, as I mentioned, a key tool to get started is the SharePoint Starter Kit. So the SharePoint Starter Kit has all of those different types of templates and things that you can get started with, so it's really nice for that. So even if you're just getting started, I would recommend downloading it and taking a look at the code because there's just so much there that's available for you, and it's updating from the community week over week. So what's new at Ignite is this concept of, again, sort of a lot of the Teams integrations between SharePoint and Teams, so tabs and web parts and application pages. We have a technology called dynamic data, which allows you to actually connect different types of web parts and specify how the output of one web part connects to other ones. So page authors have more tools to build very sophisticated dashboards. And we're continuing to expand the set of graph APIs. So there's a new page API and a new view API in preview for SharePoint. We're extending some APIs for OneDrive as well so that you can get more file previews. And generally the graph APIs are extending there as well. Now at Ignite, there's a number of different sessions in terms of getting started and working with SharePoint and OneDrive files, working with SharePoint development. And then SharePoint has this patterns and practices team that if you're not familiar, they develop a ton of open source, a huge community. There's so many useful facets that come from patterns and practices. If you're working with SharePoint and OneDrive and doing any development, you definitely should check out patterns and practices because chances are the community has developed some really robust tools for working with SharePoint and OneDrive that you won't have to build yourself. You can just take advantage of it. All right, so that was a bit of our whirlwind tour of everything with Microsoft 365. I hope you took away 5 different things that you can go do to extend your applications. You can build bots to change human conversations. You can build adaptive cards. I think that one is my favorite because it really transforms how people work, even more dramatically than some of the other ways. You can create add-ins in Word to assist the creative process. You can extend Excel with custom functions. You can harness data that comes from Microsoft Graph, work with files, work with tasks. And then finally, you can take everything that you're building and expose it in SharePoint to really customize people's websites using JavaScript. Now we have a whole set of trainings on dev.office.com/training. This will take you to a number of different open source projects and videos that you can take advantage of. We have our Office blogs on dev.office.com/blogs. We'll be making it more Microsoft 365-y over time and covering more broader topics. But in the meanwhile, there's a number of different things like community calls, for example. We have monthly calls with the product teams about a variety of different topics. So if you actually have any advanced questions or if you want to give feedback or prod on the roadmap, you can definitely join those community calls that happen every single month. And then finally, we have a number of different social channels. And then I guess the final thing I'll say is that developer program, which I mentioned earlier. You'll get a free Office 365 tendency for developing, but there's also a lot of great, really well-crafted emails that give you just the right updates about everything going on. So with that, I'd love to thank you for coming all the way to this end of the Hyatt Regency to go attend our session. Please do evaluate it. Hopefully you find something useful that will change how you develop your applications. So we appreciate all of your feedback and evaluations. And with that, if you have any questions, we'd love to take them. Thank you.